What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Corporate Bartender. I think you're going to dig today's episode. We're talking remote workforces, building a people-first culture, make versus buy decisions on talent, and keeping folks accountable in this ever-changing landscape. We are jazzed to have Mike Krass on the show today. If you don't know Mike, you're missing out. You should probably get on that. Mike's the CEO of a fully remote digital marketing agency that bases its success on leveraging a data-driven approach. He's a firm believer in having a life outside of work, taking time to give back to your communities, and he might have taken your luggage at some point. So buckle up, TCBers, grab your favorite cocktail, and let's get right on into it with Mike Krass on today's TCB.
Welcome to SkyTeam's The Corporate Bartender. If you work in HR or make people decisions in your organization, this is the place to be. Now pull up a stool, belly up to the bar, and join us for The Corporate Bartender.
It is good to see everybody. As always, it's Wednesday. It's Corporate Bartender Day. That's my favorite day. Today is episode 95, July 14th. It's officially half of July is done, which means we are pretty much halfway through 2021. I was on a call yesterday and the client kept talking about things that we were planning to do next year in 2021. And I'm like, dude, it's 22, man. He's like, damn it. Oh, today's going to be a good day. We've got a special guest today. We've got Mike Krass with us today. Say, hey, Mike, to everybody. Woo! We're going to be talking about leading remote employees and embodying a people-first philosophy. Lori Freemeyer just chatted in. How come all the girls have glasses on and the guys don't?
Good point.
There you go. Does that make you feel better?
Yeah. Now I just feel left out.
No, Mike, you're just younger than we are. That's all.
Unique.
Enjoy that good vision while you can.
Yeah, right. Look at everything you can. Oh, so a couple of quick news articles and then we'll jump right on in. I pulled a couple of things related to managing remote employees. This first article here is actually from last summer, but I thought it was still relevant. Remote managers are having trust issues. You know, this is one of the things that we talk about a lot with clients around managing remote employees, and especially younger or more green managers. They have some trust issues. It also isn't strange to older managers as well. I used to work with a pretty classical leader, to say. And she was of the mindset that if your butt wasn't in the seat, then you weren't working. And she also was pretty picky about when your butt was in that seat. And I remember we hired a kid straight out of school. It was his first job. He was a developer. It was a software company. And I was the HR guy, and I had to talk to him about his tardiness one day. And because he had been kind of drifting, you know, started showing up in his first week. It was 8 o'clock, and then it was 8:10, and it was 8:30, and then it was 9. And he said, I'll never forget it. He looked at me and this leader, and he goes, "What is it with you people and 8 a.m.? Is it a special time?" He's like, "I don't work my best at 8 a.m. And actually, you really don't want me here at 8 a.m. because at 11:30 p.m. I'm killing it." Right. Mm-hmm. But it's just that if I don't see you, I don't trust you kind of mindset, which, has been a problem since pre-COVID. But I think as we settle into this hybrid space, you know, it's still rearing its head. You guys dealing with any of that sort of trust issues with managers at the lower levels?
Not anymore.
Karen, how about you? You got a bunch of lower level managers, yeah?
Yeah, you know, it's been interesting getting the call center, the contact center employees working remote from home a year ago. There was a lot of worry about it. in the end, they've turned out to be far more productive working from home than in the office. The interesting thing is we're running a back to work pilot right now. And we thought we'd have a lot more participation.
In people that wanted to come back?
Yeah, like 20% wanted to give it a shot, and we wanted to test drive and see how it would go. And we've ended up having about 5% of that 20% that have shown up. So I think it was like the initial curiosity, what's it going to feel like? I want to go back in a couple of days and then, okay, I'm good now. I can just work from home again. But we're looking at the fall. And one of the things that's interesting is we have a CEO that is very, so far been very flexible and said to all of his senior most leaders, decide what you want it to look like for your respective organizations.
Ooh, team level. I love that.
Yeah. A couple days a week in the office, great. You want full-time in the office, that's your prerogative, whatever you want to do. And the interesting thing is that our head of EP&D, which is engineering product design, is super nervous about the engineers that are new and fresh out of school or maybe fairly inexperienced and not having that collaboration time in the office. And so there's a lot of conversation around that. Now, gratefully, I don't support that group. So or my team doesn't, so it's not, that is, I've got a little easier path, but I think a challenge for sure. But he's also one of those leaders that doesn't really trust. Like, it's like, come on, dude, they've been working from home for a year. Everybody's fine. Like,
right.
Would it be nice to be be collaborative? But I guarantee you, we are going to lose people if we don't extend that flexibility because they're running for the hills. There are so many jobs out there. Like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah, we talk about it just about every week here in some capacity, the return to work thing, because, now we got a lot more people that are actually starting to step into it. And it's funny what you described, Karen, in your experience with the 5% of the 20%.
Yeah.
If you remember last summer, Jenny Levy at Crocs, when she was coming all the time, they started their program last summer because they have factory floor and warehousing and they can't do it all remote. So they did a similar pilot with their office staff. And yeah, the first week people came in, looked around, checked it out, and then said, yeah, I'm good. I'm going to go home now. And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where it stands. Yeah. Yeah. So trust issues, it's a thing. And another issue that's been a thing perpetually since we started talking about this is burnout. Your point, Karen, that folks were more productive at home. It's the research has pointed to it time and time again. People work more, right? They're driving less. They have less sort of hang out and hover by somebody's desk, go to lunch, be late coming back, go to happy hour, right? They just work, and the burnout is real, and it's a thing that I think managers really need to be checked in on in terms of making sure that they actually know where their folks are in that regard. And that's a proactive choice, right? I don't know that employees are really anxious to step up to the plate and say, yeah, I'm pretty close to the edge here. But getting that direct conversation happening, I think is pretty important. In the article, they pointed to three tactics. One was proactively check on your employees, offer flexible work arrangements, not just remote, right? It's the time bit. How asynchronous is asynchronous, right? If I'm doing my work, maybe in the afternoon stroke evening because I've got family obligations in the morning, am I obligated to respond to your Slack message at 9:30? Or do I get to respond to it when I get to work? And then finally, making sure that remote folks actually do take some recovery time. They actually take vacation. They step away from the computer. And I think that's a big one. Through the pandemic, I didn't take any time off. I worked the whole time, right? Ruby says we are burning out too as organizational leaders. That's true. That's true. And if you guys remember, that's one of the reasons we started this little community, was just to give ourselves a little respite from trying to push the wet noodle uphill, and share some best practices, hang out, laugh a little, right? So fortunately, Laurel's here, so the dirty jokes can start now.
Gee,
Oh, there she is.
Welcome.
I was
Sunshine.
I was gonna wave to you, but I got the message that the recording was on, so
Yeah.
I'll just share with you that I was late because my dog decided to throw up on the rug right next to me.
Ew.
Perfect. You didn't want to smell that for the next hour. That's a good call.
No.
This last article I pulled actually is in Fast Company today. It says, try this brain-based leadership model to collaborate and influence others. And Ruby, it's the SCARF model
Oh,
that we taught yesterday.
Oh, that's funny. Yep.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. And basically they were sort of twisting it a little bit to use as a framework for dealing with collaborating and influencing remote folks. I thought the idea in it, the way the guy characterized it, the author, he said the brain experiences the workplace foremost as a social system, which is true, right? I mean, we base how we do our work on the folks that we have to interact with and the processes that require us to interact with people. So it's talking about getting people to bring their best selves to work. And so in order to do that, you minimize these threats to the SCARF components and maximize the rewards. So does anybody use SCARF in your leadership development? I know, Yvonne, you do.
yeah, I do a tools
Like
of
we do.
influence. I do a tools of influence training, and I've kind of swapped out different. I've used Cialdini's stuff, and I've used SCARF, and I've used a variety of different things. But I really do like the SCARF framework, just because I think it's really relatable. People can see how to apply it in different ways, and so yeah, I'll be curious to read this one about how it applies to this whole dynamic of hybrid or remote.
Yeah.
leadership.
One of the cool things about SCARF, Ruby and I did yesterday for Yvonne's organization, was we sort of overlaid disk preferences on top of the different SCARF pillars, right? So, for like relatedness, for folks whose threats get triggered around relatedness, right? That's a pronounced issue for folks on the right side of the disk diagram, right? The folks with the people focus. Certainty is the bottom half of the disk model. S's and C's would be more triggered by a lack of certainty. Ruby and I told a story about when the pandemic hit and nothing was certain. Morag, who's an ID, went into super idea generation mode, and Ruby and I went into, holy shit, what are we going to do? Nothing's staying the same. And then when she would throw her ideas over the wall, we would go, I can't even process that right now. Because her way of coping with it was generating those ideas and convincing herself that there was a path through the uncertainty. Our primary need at that point in time was finding toilet paper and chicken. Right? I remember going out for toilet paper, and I had Morag texting me different places she would call, and they would have it, and then I would go there and it would be gone. And then she's like, oh, and by the way, while you're on your way to Office Depot to buy toilet paper, right? Think about this business idea that's 180 degrees from what we were doing last week. I'm like, I just need toilet paper right now. Oh, Ruby, thanks for dropping in the acronym definition of the SCARF pillars there. Oh, look at her. Ruby's she's educating you guys with every click. So just a few things to think about in terms of managing remote employees. I would love to hear, as always, as you guys are rolling out your plans, what's working, what's not working? Are you having experiences like Karen where you say, hey, we're going to try it with this group of people, and then that group of people goes, I'm okay right now? That would be interesting for us to hear. We're sort of collecting data on that because our clients are all asking us, what are other people doing and how's it going for them? So any insight you can provide would be awesome. But we're going to jump into the conversation with Mike, Mike Krass. He's our guest here from New Orleans, Louisiana. He's the CEO of MKG Marketing. And Mike's a marketing guy. He's a data guy. He has built a seven-figure marketing business that is 100% remote. So Mike has ideas about leading remote employees and building what he calls a people-first culture. So we'll talk about that. Everybody, welcome Mike to the program. Hey, Mike.
Oh, sound effects. I love it. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah. So Mike, welcome. Tell us, just kind of give the crew here an overview of your career journey, how you got to where you are today, and include any weird or unusual jobs that you might have had along the way.
We'll start with the weird first because it's probably the weirdest. I started working when I was 15 years old. I am half German and half Italian. So the German side of my family said, if you want to go to the movies, you should get a job. And I really wanted to go to the movies. So out I went, got a job. And I got a job as a 15-year-old working for a cruise company, Holland America Cruise Lines up in Seattle, where I grew up. And I say it's my weirdest job because I was kind of the airport sign guy. I wore this Aladdin looking red vest, a really not good looking white Oxford shirt that I couldn't quite figure out how to wash because I was 15 and just couldn't figure it out. And why I say it's weird is because Saturdays and Sundays is embarkation day. So there's people flying from all over the world to Seattle. They want to go get their luggage, and then the luggage magically just shows up in the station, right? And it has to get there before they arrive. So they pick it up from the carousel and they give it to me. And I'm 15 years old. I'm not very tall, as you have no idea how tall I am because we're on Zoom, but I'm not very tall. I was even shorter as a 15-year-old. I was probably cracking like 4'11", maybe 5 feet. And I would get a couple thousand people's worth of luggage every Saturday and Sunday. And I call it a weird job because I had this Aladdin looking outfit going on and a binder with a printout, that came out of like a LaserJet printer that said Holland America Cruise Lines. And I could have been anybody. And that alone, that outfit got me everyone's luggage. Like I could still go to the airport in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Seattle, Los Angeles, any of those big cruise terminal cities. I could put that same outfit on and I could walk away with like 4,000 pieces of luggage. And it was just such an odd experiment in behavioral science of follow the 15-year-old. And that's when I started working. From there, ended up going to college. I really wanted to be a sports journalist. I love sports. And my best friend's father asked me a question that really stuck with me as a 19-year-old. So now I'm 4 years older. I'm much more wise.
Worldly, seasoned.
I'm worldly. I've now lived on 3 continents as a 19-year-old. And he said, how many hot dogs do you think you can eat in Modesto, California? Like how many days in a row do you think you can eat hot dogs for your main, form of sustenance and food? And
wow.
Like, why is that? What are you talking about, Modesto, California? What's going on here? And he said, because sports writers, you are going to live in Abilene, Texas, Modesto, California, Nowheresville, Wyoming. You're going to have a great time doing it, but you are going to survive on hot dogs for a good number of years before you actually get to upgrade to a meal that comes on a plate, because that's just the career path you're headed down. So he really challenged me as a 19-year-old to think, do I just love sports or do I love it so much that I don't care if I wear the same thing 300 days in a row and I eat hot dogs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the ballpark? And I decided I really don't like hot dogs that much. So I'm going to need to shift my thinking. And so I ended up, meeting with people who worked at advertising agencies and in marketing firms and PR firms. And I realized that they actually get paid a lot better than the sports writers, a lot better. and they get to stay in one place. They don't have to live out of their car. So that's like, I'm 2 for 2 right there.
Right.
And so I ended up going into advertising and marketing. Got my first internship in Los Angeles out of college. Showed up before everybody got there. Left after everyone had already left. That was kind of instilled in me by my boss, who was also an older friend of mine, who said, "You really need to show up because right now you're kind of." He was pretty direct. You're kind of not that important, and that's a soft
Thanks.
Yeah. So I showed up first, which meant I got all the assignments. I stayed late, which meant I got all the late assignments that came in after 5, 6, 7 o'clock, which for a Los Angeles-based ad agency, a 7 o'clock email is like absurd. Like, who on earth would respond to that but me?
Right.
So first there, last to leave, moved back to Seattle where I grew up, and that's where I met my business partner. And we realized that, well, we really loved the ad agency that we worked at, and it's a fantastic agency. They actually were acquired a few years ago by a big international holding company. It wasn't the agency that we wanted. What we wanted was a metrics-driven performance marketing agency. And what that means in plain English is we wanted to work or run an agency that had this machine, and a client would put X amount of dollars in one side, and we were responsible for a greater number coming out of the other side of the machine. And while those were definitely out there, we weren't quite sure that we wanted to both jump ship and go to them. And so instead, out of our own pure ignorance, in my words, we started our own, which we had no idea how to start an ad agency. And we're not even an ad agency. We really consider ourselves more of a digital marketing agency, as opposed to a Don Draper-esque ad agency. So that was actually 10 years ago on July 25th. We started.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, so we've managed to not go bankrupt. We've gotten close a few times, but close doesn't count. If we didn't make it, we don't get the trophy for going bankrupt. And we are, as Eric mentioned, building a people-first organization. And I would describe that as we're building an agency that we look at as being an infinite business. And I think of an infinite business as one that will outlive my useful and then my biological life, and hopefully in that order. But again, I don't control everything. So what happens will happen.
Yeah. Who's determining your useful life, Mike? That's the question, really. Hey, does it say people first on your shirt there? I'm kind of looking at the bottom of the hand.
Yeah. Let me narrow this down a little bit. So yeah, that's actually our first value of our 4 values in the company is people first. We wanted to design an agency that didn't have you up at midnight, responding to emails and delivering client work. I got to go home really early when I lived in LA, maybe 7, 8, 9 o'clock, but my business partner, she grew up in the Northeast. And so she would be managing, a $10 million account as a 24-year-old for a company like Kellogg's or General Mills in Minneapolis. And she didn't really go home until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. And that was her life for a long time. And that stuck with her. And we both wanted to focus on an agency that really valued its people and proved that we valued our people. Because ultimately we're in the knowledge business, right? If we don't have really good people, we cannot succeed. It's literally not possible. I can't cut any corners to deliver our product better if we don't have good people.
Right. And we were just talking about trust as an issue of remote managers. In this people first mindset, how do you build in that accountability so that people are taking care of their stuff and the work is getting done? How do you make sure that you're being transparent with one another?
Yeah. So we do it a couple ways. As you mentioned, when you introduced me, we started as a remote business, and we've gotten people to cluster in certain cities just based on where we've hired. But we actually, for a company that has a little less than 20 people, we employ those 20 people in 8 different states in the US. So, we're really spread out. We've got every time zone covered, including mountain. And so what we did is we had to build this agency as if we would never be in the same place at the same time. Even though that's not always the case, we had to build it that way. And so what we did is, in my own words, we created a system of accountability that was very clear and had different systems or tripwires built into it. So, we're a Scrum-based organization. Eric, you're probably familiar with Scrum. I'm sure other folks here are familiar as well. We plan out each week on Friday morning for the week that follows.
I love that. So you got your sprint plan for the week.
We sprint plan the whole week. It doesn't mean that things won't move around. They always move around. But we at least know the number of points. We work in points instead of hours. Number of points that each position can do in a given day. So we sprint that number of points and no more. And so that all goes into Asana. That's our project management system. And I think we've used Asana almost to the point of breaking it. We do a lot of weird things in there that when we submit feature requests, that's
they're like, really, Mike?
I think they have a filter for ours and they just send them elsewhere because they're like, I don't know about these guys. So within Asana, you can see the number of points that somebody has or doesn't have done per day. You can also see the tasks completed, not completed per day. That's visible to the whole team.
So everybody can see that.
Everyone can see it. Yeah. It's not hidden from anybody. So if you're behind by Tuesday or Wednesday, we know that you're not just behind. By Wednesday, we can tell that you're really behind and try and figure out what's going on, right? Did we not sprint this correctly? AKA, did we not think it was going to take as much effort and it really is taking more? That's a management problem. Or are you just not getting done that which is expected of you to get done? And each job in terms of service lines, each role at our company has a set number of points per day and week that we're accustomed to completing. So that's kind of the first, what I would call accountability tripwire that we would go through.
I love that phrase, accountability tripwire. It sounds very menacing, but I get your point. I love the notion of transparency, that everybody can see what everybody's doing. We actually go through an exercise to plan it up front. Do you guys do retros at the end of each week? Do you go back and look to see, did we miss, sizing this gig, or did we, load somebody up a little too heavy given the dependencies in the chain of the workflow?
Yeah. We actually do retros every Friday morning. And retros are not just the work amount or volume, but it's also what went well or what didn't. We treat it like a true retrospective, as in like, oh, we did it this way this week, and that's different than normal, and it worked better, or it was atrocious, and I never want to do it that way, and everyone should hear me scream from the mountaintops.
I love that so much. We teach content around what we call the 6 characteristics of high-performing teams, and one of those characteristics is learning. And the example that I use in making learning part of your process is the retrospective from Scrum. So it's really awesome to hear a story about somebody using that in a non-software development application. That's awesome. In talking about this people first idea and having this remote population, you guys did some DE&I work this last year. Tell us about that, because that was a surprisingly positive thing for you guys.
Yeah, I'd love to tell, I think 2 stories or examples stand out, and I'll frame it with, we had never done any diversity, equity, or inclusion work as a formal group before this. And then, the world goes into a global pandemic and we think, well, what better time than now? Like, what are we waiting? What are we waiting for? Like, let's just do all the most important things and let's start. So the first thing that we did, which it surprised me in such a great way, was we hired a woman by the name of Christina Williams. She runs a company called Unpacking, and they do all types of diversity, equity, and inclusion training, both in person as well as over Zoom. And the purpose of talking to Christina, who's incredibly qualified, I mean, she's got so many letters and acronyms after her name on LinkedIn. I'm not really even sure what they all mean, but very impressive. And she comes across as an impressive individual.
But does she have an Aladdin outfit and a sign?
Yeah, I'm sure for the right amount of money, she'd put I'm not worried about that yet. So what we told her was, we've never done this as a group. And this is my business partner and I just being very honest and vulnerable and saying, like, we have no idea how you're going to make this not suck. Like, I can't put lipstick on this this bad feeling that we have of not only are we going to try and do something incredibly important for our organization, but we're going to try and do it remotely, and we're convinced it's going to completely suck. And so she came to us with a bespoke program. She built it out even a little bit past her normal program to say, hey, let's go over the basics of what equity means. Let's go over the basics of, diversity and inclusion and how to support one another. And a lot of it was using, that's when Zoom had their breakout sessions. That was kind of a new feature last spring.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so she used breakout sessions. So she used like every possible tool in her toolbox to make it not suck, to make it interactive, to keep us moving, to keep it flowing, because we effectively did about 5 hours of Zoom meetings in one day, which is a lot.
It's a lot.
So that was met with, we did a survey afterwards, the entire staff. And besides a few nitpicky things that, to be honest, half of them included like internet speed in terms of I couldn't hear very well, which I cannot make your internet speed better, but
right.
Conversation. We heard awesome feedback from everyone. They said she was the perfect person to do this. This was the right time. And it was the right time because the second story I'll tell, the week after George Floyd had a knee put on his neck and he died at the hands of a police officer in Minneapolis, it was a very odd week, right? Remember, we're all remote. It's now the pandemic. So even in the cities where people are in the same city, they're not getting together.
Right.
But you could feel through like email, chat, stand-up meetings. It was an odd week. Like people were off and they were our people were very affected by that event.
Mm-hmm.
And so what my business partner and I said, we kind of bumped our heads together and said, I think we need to talk about this world event. Everyone's already talking about it. They're talking about it whether or not we are sanctioning a discussion or not that they need our permission to do so, but like it's on everyone's minds. And so what we ended up doing, and I'm a member of a group called Entrepreneurs Organization, or EO, which is purely a peer-to-peer organization and focused on experience sharing. No advice, just experience sharing. And the way that we keep an EO from giving advice is you share how you feel, because your feelings belong to you. People can judge the feelings all they want, but they can't change. It's how you individually feel.
Yeah, they can't argue with you about them either because you actually feel it.
Yeah, like, this is how I feel. It doesn't matter what you think. Like, this is how I feel. And so 2 days before, we told everyone we're having a meeting. We're deleting all client meetings after this because it's going to be a little bit heavy, but it's critical that we have this discussion because we think it's really important. So 2 days before that, we sent out an email with kind of just some rules of the road. It's about feelings. You can show up, you can speak or not speak. You can be on camera, you cannot be on camera. We basically just gave everyone permission to show up as they wanted to show up.
Sure.
And then we sent an email, like it ended up being like a drip email campaign, then we do this the day before, and then we showed up to the meeting, and it was the best meeting that this company has ever had in 10 years. Wow. People showed up in a huge way. Even the ones that didn't speak, you could tell everyone was there. Everyone supported our African-American employees. They supported everything about it. It was so powerful. I don't think anybody wasn't either actively crying or have a tear in their eyes by the end of it. And it was something that I hope, for the reason we had the meeting, we never have to have a meeting like that again, but it brought everyone together in such a huge way. And it all started because Christina gave us a lot of tools. And then I took a lot of tools to be the moderator. I took my business owner hat off, put it to the side and said, I'm just the moderator who's kind of moderating this session. And those two things were probably the best meetings that we had last spring.
What happened culturally as a result of that experience, that collective experience with the team?
A few things happened within the values system with our business, which is language that Christina taught us about. Culture is a little bit subjective in the way that she was instructing us. I know we use it a lot, like cultures fit, but we tend to talk in values fit here at MKG. And a couple things happened. The first one was we actually set priority recruiting targets for women of color, women, I should say, people of color, or any, I would just describe it as an unincluded group of people in a marketing agency, which historically marketing agencies have, here's a big blanket statement, but they've been loaded with a lot of people that look like me and people like
we watched Mad Men. We know.
Yeah,
bunch of misogynistic white guys. That's all you marketing people are.
People like Coca-Cola show up to a group of folks that look just like me, and they say, we would love to reach, like a Latinx population in South Los Angeles. And people like me don't hang out in that neighborhood. I didn't grow up like that, and my Spanish is pretty poor on a good day. So why on earth would I be hired to do that kind of work? Yet it happens every single day. So we said, we cannot change the whole industry, but we can control our company. And so we set actual hiring and recruiting targets that we've been watching really closely. The other thing we've done is within service lines, we're rolling it out this year, we're creating service line champions, and we taking gender or race out of the conversation. We went out of our way to speak to the more quiet, introverted folks at the company who might not speak up so loud on a Zoom meeting saying, I would love to be the team champion this quarter or this year. And we really went out of our way to say, like, hey, this is something that you could do. Like, are you interested in this? Or are we just totally pumping your tires in a way that you don't want that to happen? So those are two things just immediately that came out that we feel are really important, that folks who don't use a loud voice are given a loud voice and are given a lot more space to express themselves. And then setting hiring and recruiting targets.
So speaking of hiring and recruiting, just this notion of bringing talent into the organization in a remote or hybrid type of space, are there any sort of special things that you do in your recruiting process, knowing that your folks are going to be remote? And do you ever get to the point where you think, all right, we've been trying to fill this gig for a little while now, maybe we should just find a vendor? We should buy it versus making it ourselves.
Yeah. So in terms of recruiting, there's a lot of tricks that are little tactics that our team uses on the recruiting process. One easy one is, like in LinkedIn, when we're looking people up, do they speak any other languages? Right? You forget that people fill that out. Like, we hired Eddie Castillo. He's awesome. He started with us on March 2nd or 3rd, I forget. I didn't even remember that it said on his LinkedIn profile that he speaks Spanish. I mean, he grew up speaking Spanish, and now he's got a client that actually runs a lot of paid media in Spanish. And while he's not doing the translations, because he doesn't have like an MBA in business Spanish, he can look at it and say, like, well, I'm a native Spanish speaker. This is right. This is off. This is not going to work. So there's little recruiting like tactics you can use to try and figure out, organizations also work. Anything you can really filter in LinkedIn, you can create those filters to look for folks with certain expertise, women in tech marketing, cybersecurity marketing professionals, like that kind of stuff. And then you had asked a question, Eric, about build or buy. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, because I think a lot of us are, as the hybrid thing sort of settles in, we're worried about turnover of employees, right? We're worried about folks leaving and not being able to backfill those spots. And if that's the case, when we make the choice, how do we make that choice to pull the ripcord and engage a firm rather than trying to find an employee?
Yeah, I'd like to tell a story about something we're actually going through right now, because we're going through this process as we speak. We don't have a full-time HR person at MKG Marketing.
What? No HR? Yeah.
It's a little bit running back by committee. My business partner heads up HR. Our managing director is involved in all the employee development in terms of professional development, hiring, terminations, and then our executive assistant catches all kinds of things that we need her to catch.
Right.
But there isn't one person. And so we actually started going down this road earlier this year, because looking at our growth plans, our growth plan is to bring people first, to triple the number of people in the next, I think it's 5 years, if I'm remembering the timeline right. And so that means we are going to need a human resources or a people operations leader. And so we looked at outsourcing. We interviewed a few PEOs. One was up in Toronto, one was in Cleveland or Milwaukee or some such state. We kind of got an idea for their business model and how we could literally just offload this responsibility, which as a business owner sounded incredibly attractive. It's like, cool. Like if I hire someone in Canada, I don't have to worry about that. That's the PEO's problem. Like that's not my problem. And then we started talking to HR folks, people with an HR background. I actually put out a call on LinkedIn and said, does anyone know any really sharp HR people who are not ready for a full-time job? Because I believe right now a full-time HR person would be bored out of his or her mind at our company. Like there's just not enough going on for them yet. Hopefully that'll change. And I got this great response, and we ended up talking to this, I'll keep their name private. We'll call them Erica. And Erica hails from a place that rhymes with Schmorlando, if you can figure out what that is.
I love Schmorlando.
Yeah, great in the winter. Let me tell you, great in the winter, Schmorlando. And Erica was exactly the type of person we were looking for. Erica wanted to come back into the workforce. Erica had been out of the workforce by choice for a while, first because of raising a family, and then because Erica just didn't want to come back right away. And Erica had worked at a company where she was higher number like 20 or 30. And when she left, they were in the thousands in terms of, total headcount. So she saw how she survived all that growth. I honestly don't even know. Like it's mind boggling to me. But the more we talked to Erica, the more we realized for our stage of growth right now and where we want to go in the next 5 to 10 years, we could not outsource the people operations. It was just too important for us. And I don't want to say that outsourcing it is the wrong thing to do for everybody, but for us, Carrie, my business partner, her and I looked at each other and we said, I just don't think we can do this PE. Like take the money out of it, which they're going to cost a lot. Take the money out of it. I don't think they are going to bring that real like people first vibe and value system into every single interview and every single interaction as we hire or fire. And that for us just wasn't an acceptable risk to take. And so we're excited as soon as we can carve out the budget to get Erica from Schmorlando working with us on a contract basis. And then Erica, we've been pretty clear with her that we intend to make that more of a permanent thing. And I think we've just kind of found the right person. And even if it's not Erica, I'm sure that we can find another person like her out there that wants to kind of start small and get going. And again, like I said, we weren't fully confident that we could get that out of a PEO or some sort of third-party vendor, payroll system or whatever. And because we couldn't feel that guarantee, we decided that the outsourcing thing just wasn't going to work for us right now.
Yeah. So, given that you're all remote, Schmorlando wasn't a stretch for you. That wasn't a big deal. You're like, oh, she's in Schmorlando. That's fine.
No, not a big deal. I mean, we've already got an employee in the state of Florida, so we're now we're open to anybody from any state, but we're trying to stick with folks in the 8 states we already are, because it's a real pain in the backside to have to register with all these new states and establish Nexus or don't establish. I know more about Nexus than I am proud to know.
Ever wanted to.
I know. I'm like, if we hit double digits on our Nexus responsibilities, I'm going to freak out.
So Mike, being an all remote company from the beginning, what advice would you have for folks who are now settling into remote as kind of new, as an ongoing concern post-pandemic, right? If this is going to be part of how we work forever, what advice would you give to folks who, for whom this is a new thing on the forever timeline?
Yeah, we talked about transparency and those accountability systems and tripwires earlier. I won't repeat that, but I'll just say that. What I said earlier, find that for your business. The second thing that I'll add on top of that took us years to learn, and this is really a reflection of Carrie, my business partner, and I maturing as business owners. we used to wait way too long on things. We used to wait too long when we had issues. We thought that it could maybe get better. It almost never gets better. In fact, it usually gets worse. At a rapid clip, it gets worse. And so what I would say is all that accountability stuff paired with short timelines. So at MKG, every new employee starts on a 90-day trial. So in 90 days, by day 80 or so, we know if we're going to extend them a full-time offer or not. If an employee is already working here and they're having any kind of issues, it's not a get better or get fired plan, but we use different systems such as like a milestone tracker. So we can say, we need you to get better at these two things, and we as the company need to get better at this one thing. So let's create a milestone tracker. We'll each update it once a week, and we just use it as a stoplight, red, yellow, green. Red means you didn't have a great week. Yellow means kind of in the middle, and green means did great at this specific thing. And those milestone trackers will put a time box on those. So 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And we're looking for progress in that time box. And it's a very visual thing, right? If you start red and you never get out of red, at that point, an employee, in our experience, has usually started to look for a job.
Yeah.
We're still willing to work with them, but we're kind of coming to them and being like, hey, you're grading yourself red. We're grading you red.
Right.
This is not working yet.
I love that visibility piece, right? I've worked in my HR career and with clients with a lot of managers who are trying to deal with performance issues, and they do it soft and they do it with generalizations, and they wonder why they're still having the same issue 6 months later. Yeah.
And, with remote, you can't quite see, like in your example, the young software engineer showed up and you could physically see him come to work.
Right.
I know for a fact, because one of our employees works 10 to 6 p.m. because they just don't function very well in the morning, and they happen to be on the East Coast. It actually works really well for them because they're ahead of a lot of their clients. But they told me one time, like, when I first started working here, I used to go onto Slack at like 9, and I would oftentimes be in bed, and I'd be like, here, because they felt that responsibility of like, oh, I need to show that I'm here. If I write here on Slack, then I'm here. Yeah. And I was like, well, what do you normally do after you say here? And they were like, I usually go back to sleep for 30 minutes. And I was like, well, I mean, you can keep doing it if you want, but your contract clearly says 10 to 6 Eastern Standard Time, period. Like, if you feel the need to say here at 9, go for it, but you actually don't need to do that.
Yeah, you can de-stress yourself a little.
Yeah. And they were like, yeah, my partner is always like asking me why I'm doing this or that or the other thing. And like, you just, okay. I mean, you keep doing here if you want, but you actually don't need to do that.
Right. Oh, that's funny. Mike, if we could all do one thing to improve our lives in this crazy, ever-changing, complex time, what would you suggest? How could we show up differently?
I really thought about this question when you sent it to me. And I think something that I've been doing a lot more in the past few years, and that accelerated coming out or in the pandemic, which arguably we're still in a global pandemic, is read deep work. So
what do you mean? What do you mean by deep work?
Deep work meaning like things without pictures, things that don't come on social media, things that might require you to read them more than once, like a book like this that's actually this is like an inch thick.
Hey, Keith Ferrazzi, he wrote the foreword to our first book.
Yeah.
Cultivate. Yeah, he wrote the foreword.
So the deep work that I'm reading right now is actually a lot of thoughts around like Stoic philosophy. So like Marcus Aurelius, the famous Roman emperor who most people know from Gladiator because Joaquin Phoenix played him. Marcus Aurelius became the emperor of the Roman Empire, which was at the time the biggest empire on earth. Inherited a bunch of wars where they were getting their asses kicked, and they weren't doing well on the war front. And there was the Antonine Plague. So 5 to 10 million people.
That killed some people.
Yeah, killed about 5 to 10 million people by rough estimates. So The Stoic philosophy. I wasn't really into philosophy. I took a class in college. I didn't do well in it because I didn't like being forced to read, but the concept of Stoicism and, being brutally honest and accepting that which is in front of you and then making decisions to move forward while at the same time not completely ignoring your feelings, that I would consider that like a pretty deep conversation. It's not something that you're just going to read and then, be like, all right, I'm going to go get a McFlurry now. It usually kind of you need to take a few minutes to come down off that for good reason. And so, that idea of something that is deep that makes you think that you don't have to agree with, but makes you really think has been so helpful for me, getting into the stories of like, again, Marcus Aurelius, James Stockdale, who was, the highest ranking prisoner of war in the Vietnam War. He's a big Stoic. And a guy like Epictetus, who started his life as a slave, became a famous philosopher in the Roman Empire who guided the emperor and then was actually banished from the
kicked out.
Yeah. And Domitian was like, no, I'm good with you. Like, you can just go away forever. You're not allowed here anymore. And so hearing about those stories and how just what they were thinking is really powerful stuff. And you don't have to go back thousands of years to find something powerful or deep. I'm sure that in your lives, you can look at, the modern day deep writers of like Brene Brown or other folks that really make you think. I enjoy that. And I encourage other people to read because like John Wooden says, once you're done learning, you're through. And reading is a great way to learn. And I'm even trying to get my younger nieces and nephews to learn or to read more. It's really hard with the 13 and 12-year-olds because reading's not cool. But I'm doing a lot of different things to try and get them to read books.
like not Snapchat. I get it.
Oh, yeah.
I've got 20 and 17, and it's the same. It's the same. I love that you poked at Stoic philosophy. It's funny. I stumbled on, is in my recommended, you should buy this book because you've bought these books on Amazon. So a little of the Amazon AI pointing me that way. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And I picked that up and I loved it so much. I couldn't always be reading because I have to be moving around. So I got the Audible as well. So now I kind of bounce between reading it and listening when I'm at the gym or on a walk or something. I love the way that, you kind of read or hear a passage and then you think about that thing and how that relates to what's going on in the world today in general or in your life in specific. And I think it's that reflectivity that we, in the go that has been COVID life at work, we go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, and they're very tactical and they're very sort of tick the box meetings. We don't have a lot of that deep thinking time. And this notion of reading deep works, to your point, you can't just bounce to a McFlurry. You've got to think about it because it probably will hit you. I know that, Ruby's reading a lot of Brene Brown, Lori and Ruby both right now. And, we love Brene here at Sky Team. And every time you read anything of hers, you can't make it through the whole chapter, right? You read a story or a point and it hits you in some way and you stop and you think about it. And
actually usually say things like, whoa.
like out loud?
Yes, that. Yeah. Routinely.
Yeah, I really like the deep thinking and you're right with meditations and Marcus Aurelius. I'm a bit of a speed reader. Like I read a lot of spy novels for fun. And my wife is always like, my God, you're done with another one. But I could read maybe a page of meditations and then I would have to stop. So I'm like, I can't read this any longer. Like this is right. This is too, like my brain was actually overloaded. So that might've been a little too deep. You got to
wade into that pool.
But deep work, highly recommended.
Awesome. Well, guys, do you have any questions for Mike? What questions do you have for Mike and his remote leading journey?
I was going to say, how'd you get to New Orleans?
I married a woman from Louisiana, which is one of two ways you get to New Orleans. You either went to school here and you forgot to leave, or you married a woman from here or a man and you got brought here. So I did enjoy, I lived in San Francisco before New Orleans. And I love visiting New Orleans every single time we come to see her family. And there's just so much flavor and grit under your fingernails. And it's a really special city. There's a lot wrong with this city, but there's a lot that's really special too.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So you're what we in the talent acquisition business refer to as the trailing spouse.
I didn't know I had a name. That's pretty cool. I'll have to tell my wife that. Yeah.
I have a quick question. Just thinking about, we've been thinking a lot about leading change, right? Especially this past year, of course. Is there anything special that you think you all do from a leading change perspective in your remote environment?
Yeah, change management in an organization is, those are ugly words. Nobody but the leadership seems to like change management. Off the top of my head, one thing that we try to do is we try to tell people what's going to happen in bits and pieces slowly. So instead of just showing up and dropping what our account team used to call bombs, when we were a little less communicative with our account leadership team, we would just show up to these all hands meetings and drop bombs on the whole company that would surprise everyone and get a lot of like one-on-one DM chatter going on Slack of like, what the heck are these people doing with this company? And we've learned that even, again, we're just under 20 people. We're a small company, but we attempt to lead a lot of those change announcements. So we lead them through, like we send out a weekly email on Mondays of what's going on with the priorities of the company. My business partner sends a Wednesday video of just kind of what's going on with the company. They're not always the same. They're usually different. And then we have retrospective on Fridays. So there's written, there's, asynchronous video and audio, and then there's a live meeting at the end of the week. And then we do quarterly all hands. So in terms of leading change, we attempt to lead it as many times as possible and kind of almost like strategically leak it through the company because we know they're going to talk about it anyways. The other thing that we did, and I know, Eric, we're kind of running on time here, but I'll just share this example is we did meetings earlier this year, and we called them bulldozer meetings. And we asked two questions. We asked, number one, what do you do that absolutely charges you up? Like if you did this all day, you would basically be like Wonder Woman or Iron Man or whatever. And then the second question was, what do you do that are energy vampires? Doesn't mean you're not good at it, but you completed that assignment or task and all of a sudden you're just like, I feel like I ran a marathon. Like I feel awful. It might have only been a task, but you still feel like you're just vampired straight out, all your energy. And so when we do those kind of things, like instead of just asking everyone, like in a group setting, what we did was we gave it to them in writing. So they wrote their answers. And then we had an hour-long meeting with everybody, which as a 20-person company, we have the luxury of doing because we're small. An hour-long meeting with every single person to go over their answers. And nobody showed up in the hour-long meeting and didn't add something new that they didn't write because they didn't think about it or they weren't pressed, to really go into it. And so in terms of change management, we took everything out of there. We aggregated and ranked what we wanted to tackle as a company. And then we shared that with everybody. So they could actually see, it might not have been in their own words, but they could be like, oh, like Eric and Ruby also kind of had that problem. They said it differently, but we're all talking about the same thing. And I can now see a bit of like, even though we're a service company, almost like a product roadmap of when are we going to get to things like this?
Those things. Yeah.
And it was a really interesting exercise to go through. And I hope as we grow, we can keep doing things like that. It was tough. Like that was our Q1 rock, was to have all the interview meetings. And it went to the very last day of March to get it done. So
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I think, Mike, you just actually paid the cover charge to the bartender with bulldozer meetings. Man, that's a powerful little statement and a little component that I'm gonna steal. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm gonna steal that unabashedly. I think that's a really fantastic concept. The sort of getting to the nitty gritty of what are you passionate about and what's bleeding you dry right now. And especially in small organizations, you know, we collect duties as the organization grows, and sometimes we don't ever let them go. And whether that's our choice because we don't think anybody else could do it as good as we do, or the way that we do, or that we feel that, well, Mike loves that I do this and he would be disappointed in me if I stopped doing this and if I told him I wanted to punt this. So giving folks a venue to talk about what lights them up and what they might be able to offload at some point in time, I think that's a fantastic tool. So thank you, guys. Thanks, Mike, for sharing. And thanks for being here with us today. Let's give him a big ups for being here today. Thanks, Mike. I love it. Get the little Johnny Carson bow at the end. It's perfect. All right. Well, you're welcome to hang out here for the next couple of minutes, Mike. We're going to do what we call funny things, good feels, and our semi-quarantine cocktail. So today's funny things, some tweets collected that you might have missed. Funny thing number 1. What's the dumbest belief you had as a child? Well, when I was 4 or 5, I swore that bird seeds grew birds, thus the name. When my parents asked me to prove it, I planted a pile of bird seeds. The next day, there were loads of birds where I planted the seeds, showing I was right. Funny thing number 2, this is for anybody who watched the Euro 2020 this week. I asked my dad who he's rooting for, and he responded, "Everything bad that's ever happened in the world is because of England," without looking up. So I imagine he was Forza Italia. A couple of HR ones. This one just made me laugh. Well, I guess one dude quit. It's now 4 guys. A fast-paced environment means the job is actually 3 to 5 jobs. How about this one? Employers, we can't find anyone to work with us. Americans, will you pay us more? Employers, no. Also, write us a custom letter about why working for us would be your life's passion. And it wouldn't be the bartender without a slightly dirty one. This is my favorite funny thing of the day. We went with almond milk because nut juice sounded all sorts of wrong. Oh boy. Yep. That's for you, Laurel. That is definitely for you. Today's good feels story is about a girl from Wheeling, Illinois, who helps people celebrate their birthdays. And I'm going to show you guys a quick, minute and a half video because it's adorable. It's just adorable. It's adorable. Let me make sure I have my loop back open in case my browser sound is turned off, because I would like you to be able to hear her because her voice is just even more adorable. All right, you guys ready? Let's play this video. So let me know if you can't hear it.
I made cake boxes. I feel like COVID has been really hard and lots of people have lost their jobs and they haven't celebrated their birthday in a long time.
60-year-old Maya Schaub from Wheeling, Illinois, created birthday boxes to make sure no birthday is left uncelebrated.
It's a box that is stuffed a cake mix and evaporated milk and stuff to make cake, and it even has a birthday card, a burrito card, and a Target card.
She came to me with the idea of, hey, I'm thinking about my birthday cake, but there's a lot of kids out there who maybe don't have one for their birthday. What can we do? So it kind of snowballed from there. She decided she wanted to do a box with a cake mix, and then we reached out to some local businesses to see if they wanted to get involved.
I just thought of it because COVID struck like a year ago. So I thought we could do it this year and it would bring a smile to people's faces.
The boxes are going to the Wheeling Township Food Pantry. We just made the first delivery for the 7 boxes, and because of the support that we've gotten, we're hoping to also do July and August as well.
If someone's nice, then it will spread around the whole world, and the whole world will be filled of kindness, and it will be great.
Oh, sweet. Oh,
Isn't that awesome?
So good.
Oh, I love that one. Her voice just made me happy.
Nearly 3 years since Molly Tippett, the
Oh dear.
college
Hold
student,
on.
was killed while jogging.
We don't need to know about that.
Oh no.
Oh no. Nice work, Eric. Nice work on crushing the feel-good vibe. Just crushing it.
Yeah. Whoops.
Whoops. On that note, today's semi-quaint quarantine cocktail is the high school party. It's a riff on going to high school with me because I've been really busy this week. You got some Boone's Farm up there, a little Mad Dog 2020, Night Train Thunderbird, Wild Irish Rose, and a new entry that I wasn't aware of, Cisco, which sounds hot. I don't know. Oh, guys, thank you so much. Wednesdays are my favorite days, and you guys are my favorite people. Mike, thanks again. Another big ups for Mike for being here today. You guys are awesome. We will see you next week. Mike, I'll make sure to get links in on the show notes to all the things we talked about, to your business, to Christina Williams. Thank you again for being here. Guys, we'll see you next week. Have a good night.
Bye, y'all. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you had a good time and learned a thing or two at today's happy hour, please share it with your friends. If you want to join our tribe, head on over to skyeteam.cloud/TCB or email us at info@skyeteam.com. That's SKYE team.com. Thanks again, and remember, you've always got friends at the Corporate Bartender.